Good
Hello.
morning.
Okay, keep on going.
So, we talked about the hard nougat of the chewing gum of evolution, surrounded by the hard candy of ecology. And now we're surrounding that hard candy with a cupcake of physiology. And this is going to be fun. We're going to talk about a lot of things under an overarching theme that you've already been thinking about in reading up in the last week to prepare for this the start of this physiology unit, with a scenario in the Arctic with a lot of Arctic questions and a lot of visiting that you did digitally with Dr. Jacobs and Ms. Bingham into the high Arctic, into Canada's high Arctic. And we're excited about this unit because it's exciting. It's also kind of sad and terrifying. And so I think it's important that we talk about those things.
So we're going to talk about them in the context of physiology. What is physiology? Well, it's kind of all of the things that happen inside of your body. And that's pretty much
like my feelings?
Like your feelings.
Not my feelings.
Not your feelings. Although your feelings are in part controlled and monitored by physiology,
yes, that's
right?
Good. See, I see how we did that. That was
good. Okay, so like all of the things that are happening inside the organism. So they are definitely at the organism level and below, right? So they're happening in your tissues, in your organ systems, and all of these things. And, you know, the definition of physiology is kind of like, things that happen in your body. Okay, so don't worry about defining it.
Let's just kind of add it to the pile, though. We've talked a number of times about way back in evolution, right, where we talked about the definition of species, where it wasn't an Aristotelian, like a strict dichotomy of you're this or that it's fuzzy. And a strict definition of a definition. My definition is this. My definition is fuzzy. And it's fuzzy because biology is fuzzy.
Yeah.
And I say that as someone who studies hard chitinous organisms. Biology just is fuzzy. It's philosophically fuzzy.
Okay.
And that's good.
Good. So physiology is stuff that happens inside your body. And we're just going to kind of reconnect with a larger body, so the planet. And where are we going to be anticipating the greatest changes in average temperature on the planet?
Stamp.
Yay! Good. Okay. Super good. So we're focusing on the polar regions, right? And it's kind of, there's a beautiful, and we don't have time to go into this, but like you can totally read this. But there's going to be a lot more change happening in the Arctic than in the Antarctic. Although when change happens in the Antarctic, it's kind of like catastrophic and huge, like massive pieces of ice. But a lot more change happening in the north than in the south. And that's a function actually of the physical environment. But we can't get into that right now. But yes, these are the places. So we're going to be focusing our conversations really about what's happening in the north. And in the context of physiology, obviously in the context of the climate crisis. So we can study the climate crisis from all sorts of perspectives. We can also focus on meaningful adaptation as well as potentially some remediation at all of these sort of different levels, and we should be concerned for all of these reasons. We're going to focus in this course on the biological effects, but we're also going to include the cultural effects, and we're going to tell you a little bit about why that matters. There are 9 sovereign nations that occupy Arctic territory, and within those, there are many, many more sovereign indigenous nations that occupy those territories. They are the least responsible for what's going on in the climate crisis, but they are probably some of the hardest affected. And actually right now there are international conversations going on in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt for COP27 that have included indigenous voices in these conversations. I mean, with a ridiculous amount of generosity and kindness, a lot of indigenous leaders are saying, let us be part of the solution to the problem that all of y'all caused. And so there's a real opportunity to learn from indigenous leaders and scholars about what we might be able to do in the future. So, this is some stuff. I don't even know why we have the slide in here anymore. Stuff that's included, but we are currently doing our best to change up the physiology unit on CourseLink. So this semester, it may seem a little disconnected, but maybe not. It just depends. If you have any questions about it, like you find a quiz question that's not at all related, or you have you see a typo or whatever, please let us know. Because Ms. Bingham and I went up north this summer to do some work, and we are trying to fold it in as much as possible. And so it'll be a little bit, probably a little bit rough. It takes 10 years for a course to get good, so just give us that kindness and patience. But if you need any help with anything, just get in touch and we'll fix it. No problem.
We're all thinking 10 years, like that's a lot of retakes.
Yeah. Okay. But let's just kind of like get our brains to where we need to be when we're talking about physiology. And so what we're talking about is really sort of from this level here, the organism and down, right? And the way that they respond to changes in average temperature, and to all of the things that happen as a result of those changes, right? So not only, will there be different challenges with respect to homeostasis, but there will be different challenges with respect to being able to get the food that they're, used to getting, and that will affect their physiology. So there's all of these different things through ecology that we need to consider that have significant evolutionary consequences, right? So hopefully you'll see how all of that ties in together.
Mm-hmm. So this is not a new thing, right? It's perhaps new that we don't have to spend as much time as we might have in class a decade ago convincing some portion of the class that this is actually a thing that is going on. I think that battle more or less has been turned, that tide has been turned. But even here, so if you look at this from the 11th of September in 2009, this is a lot of researchers from around the world talking about kind of gathering evidence in the world's largest or second largest scientific journal about changes associated in the Arctic with changing climate. And they had a really interesting summary of that, where they summarized a lot of the information, for instance, here, with looking at the average time of flowering for trees and plants and shrubs in various different genera. Those are the lines that used to have a much later date of flowering. And now, or closer to the date of the publication of this paper, that date is arriving more early. Why would they have a flowering date that's moving forward in the year? Because of an increase in warmth, an increase in temperature. There's also the fact that changes in temperature in the Arctic associated with changes in ice could have potentially positive effects on the ecological characteristics of different species that we talked about in the last unit, like fecundity and mortality. And so as we look at changes in the ablation rate, or how quickly the snow comes off the land, we see that caribou sizes tend to be increasing and mortality tends to be decreasing. Is that necessarily a good thing? It kind of depends. If you're going to eat a lot of it depends. It's yet another fuzzy answer of it depends. We've also documented, scientists have documented across the north, changes in the abundance. Look at the little inset here of these guys. This is, instead of the ants go marching one by one, hurrah, this is the herbivores. The caterpillars go marching many by many, and they eat, hurrah. Well, it depends. It depends how tightly related those arriving herbivores are with the species, the new taxa of plants that they will find upon that landscape. It's unambiguously going to change things. And then there's another, just kind of, that last example is perhaps about the additions of taxa to different communities. But then there's the replacement, and the fact that in the subarctic and the near Arctic, that we're documenting hunters, trappers, lots of different communities are documenting the replacement of the Arctic fox with the more widely distributed southern fox that we see here, Vulpes vulpes, the red fox.
And what I just learned recently about caribou and what's happening, especially with the porcupine herd, and the very, very tight relationship that they have with the people of Nunavik, is that, while populations may not be dropping, although in some cases they definitely are. Their also migration routes are changing. So they're getting farther and farther away from the Indigenous communities that have this really intimate relationship with them. They are spiritually connected to those people and the people with them. And so it's not just about numbers, it's also about locations.
It's yes, so much. That's a great so much about location.
Right. Yeah.
And timing.
Yeah.
And location and timing is kind of all of the things.
It's kind of
What's the most important thing in ecology? Timing. It's like comedy.
Dear.
So this is a slightly even older review that those principally white male scholars did refer to, but Camille Parmesan is an ecologist at the University of Plymouth. And this was a large review paper in the annual review of ecology, evolution, and systematics. As you are becoming more and more familiar with the process of writing scientific papers and submitting assignments in science at the university, keep an eye and an ear out for annual review of blah, blah, blah kind of journals. They're a great place for you to find kind of very up to the date citations, hundreds of citations in these papers. They tend to have 300 plus citations at the end of this. So it's a great way, if you find an annual review article like this, you can go to the back and just have a whole bunch of material to supplement your reading and your writing.
Yay. Okay.
So again, with the where and the when, this was the abstract that Camille wrote, that Dr. Parmesan wrote.
So what we're focusing on are sort of big scale patterns, right? We're talking in the context of the climate crisis. What we're going to see are range restricted species, so species who are deeply adapted to their environments, particularly polar and mountaintop species, show severe range contractions, so even further than contracting, and have been the first groups in which entire species have gone extinct due to recent climate change. So things literally going extinct off the top of mountains or off the polar regions, right?
And just before we leave this slide, this is a call out to the fact that we've positioned this unit in terms of talking about the north, but all of the things that we're talking about, all of the processes, all of the consequences extend into the tropics because of mountaintop extinctions. That's and ask me to expand on that later.
Because it goes well into the conversation in the evening.
So our Wi-Fi is lagging, so our video is. So I should be like picking my nose, but apparently our voice is coming through.
Okay, cool.
Apologies for that.
Yeah. And in the apocalypse, you can just come to our backyard. Okay. Okay. What will really happen to polar bears then? Oh my goodness. So we're totally shifting the conversation. We're going to talk about polar bears. We're going to talk about other cold adapted species. We're going to like freak you out with like the beautiful diversity that exists. And I really like this unit. So yay.
Death to who?
Death to humanity.
Oh,
yeah.
The call of the dodo.
Yeah.
Nobody mentioned that's why they ate them so quickly. Death to humanity.
That was their call.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
All the sailors like, I think we should eat that.
Wonderful. Okay, so what will happen and how do we know? So I hope that through the ecology unit, the answer that comes immediately to mind is it depends, right?
Yep.
And so we need to know some things, and we need to, we can't just come up with an answer. This is not a multiple choice question. What will happen to the polar bears in the context of the climate crisis?
It depends.
It depends. Okay. Oh, I don't have a Menti prepared, and we don't have the Wi-Fi to be able to support it. So why don't we can use the chat.
Yep.
And why don't we say what things would you need to know about polar bears? Put them in the chat in order to, or you can write on the screen, although if you write on the screen, I'm going to have to delete it all later. So it's up to you. You decide. You can write on the screen. What do you need to know about polar bears? What questions do you need answered in order to make a decision about what's going to happen to them in the context of the climate crisis?
That's great. There's a couple of already. So distribution, hunting patterns, fundamental niche, realized and fundamental niche.
Very good.
Population density, lots of thoughts, lots of desire to know about food. What are they eating? When are they eating it?
You were saying lifestyle, totally. Yep.
Current range, metabolism, diet, if their prey can survive under certain conditions.
Yeah.
Swimming, that's great.
That's really good.
How the weather affects their coat, their life cycle.
Yeah. Oh, and habits, for sure. Yep. Super
Reproduction and raising of offspring, interactions with humans, yes.
So good.
Possibility of interbreeding. Yay, all those things.
Amazing. Okay, so yes to all of those things. We are going to answer them over the next little while, like the next few weeks. So you'll have the answers to all of those things.
Such as we do.
Yeah. So here's our list. Yeah. It is pretty much the same as yours, right? Yeah. Species biology, population biology stuff, if we're going to, introduce a climate crisis. And so we're going to kind of work through these things. We're also going to take breaks and we're going to tell you about some pretty freaky fish and all of that stuff. But we'll use the polar bear as our kind of main narrative throughout all of this.
It's a very dangerous touchstone. You don't touch them much, but
yeah. So let's take a look at some data. We're going to do this until the end of class. So we're just going to start the conversation, right? You wanted to know about distribution, like where they are.
Which is a great question.
Which is a good question.
So here's the data.
Yeah. So take a look at this. And what we'd love for you to do is in the chat, take a look at this and come up with 2 conclusions from these data. So this is kind of the thing that we do in 1070, right? Not just one conclusion, but or an inferred conclusion about their ecology or their population size, or just a flat out conclusion based on these data. So what we have is in the darker areas, that's where there's a higher concentration of them. In the lighter areas, that's where they are on occasion, a lower concentration. Let's come up with 2 conclusions in the chat, please.
That's great. So their chats are starting to roll in. They tend to stay near the water. There's large concentrations around coastlines. They tend to inhabit places near water. Their prey tends to be aquatic. They live in the cold. They need water and cold. Prefer sea ice near the ocean. They like coastal regions. Polar bears can only handle a certain level of cold. And then, yes, quoting the vanilla, ice, ice, baby.
Okay.
That's very good.
When you look at this, what do you see?
So first of all, I have to look at it, reorient myself, and be like, I'm looking at a polar map of the world spread around, which is a great way to reconsider, because maps are just projections, right? Like there's no kind of normal that you would expect. So I have to reorient. When I look at that, what do I see? I see Canada having a wealth of polar bears. I see a lot of dark. What do you see?
Yeah, I see that for sure. And so just if you're wondering, the world's population is probably around 25,000. It may be a little bit lower than that. 15,000 of which live in Canada.
The population of polar bears.
Uh-huh. Yeah. So it's kind of a big deal. And what else do I see? I see maybe a more fundamental and realized niche distribution going on.
I like that.
So
the lighter being the fundamental and the darker being their realized?
Maybe.
That's a good hypothesis.
It's a hypothesis, right?
Is that an idea you can test?
It's an idea I can test. Okay, so, and what else do I see? I definitely see then that coastlines are really important for polar bears. But I also see that open water is also a necessity. So access to water is a big deal. And what else do I see?
Yeah, because look at that Hudson Bay in terms of the coastline. So coastline clearly, and yes, but that northern central part of Hudson Bay, that's a long expanse of open water.
Yep.
That is dense.
Yep, exactly.
Bears to the left of me. Bears to the right of me.
Okay, super good. So great, good conclusions.
Yep. Well done.
Folks are getting like 2 of them.
Self 5.
Good. Okay. Moving on then. So let's pile on some more data. Let's go with this. What conclusions can we make about the ice? So please take a look at this, spend some time, come up with 2 things.
So time on the bottom. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Some more song lyrics. We went from ice, ice, baby to bye, bye, baby, bye, 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 ice. Yeah. Melting ice. The amount of ice is steadily decreasing over time. Ice is decreasing with every passing year. Mariah Carey is melting.
Okay. Super. So this is the extent in millions of square kilometers. Okay. Arctic sea ice extent in millions of square kilometers. So ice is really critical in an Arctic or Antarctic habitat. And I think we have a bit of time. Can I kind of riff on about ice a little bit?
Ice, ice, baby.
Ice, ice, baby?
Yeah.
Okay, do you mind? Because it's
Go.
really cool stuff. So ice, why does it matter? First of all, it provides a whole bunch of habitat for things, right? So this protective layer of ice over the Arctic Ocean or the Antarctic Ocean is pristine and beautiful on the top, but so funky and dirty on the bottom. It's covered in ice algae, which attracts ice worms, which attracts little fish, which attracts bigger fish, and it creates these habitats, these basically floating coral reefs, right? On the surface. And so it really contributes to a lot of the biodiversity of the ocean. And it's really important that we have those seasonal changes in ice. The other thing that's critical, and this happens a lot more so in the Antarctic, where it's 14 million square kilometers of ice that form every year. Think about this. Think about the number of square kilometers of ice per day that would need to form over a period of about 3 weeks. Okay, so when that happens, and if you're unfamiliar with the physics of ice, and I totally am, so I'm gonna, just kind of keep this nice and simple. But basically, when you have molecules of water that are getting colder and colder, what happens is at about 4 degrees Celsius, those molecules kind of expand, right? So this is really bananas because ice or water is the only material in which its solid form floats on its liquid form, which basically, I mean, is an absolute sort of coincidence that has made Earth livable. Otherwise, all of the ice would, sink to the bottom of the ocean, right? But what happens is at about 4 degrees Celsius, it starts to expand and starts to lose density. At 0 degrees Celsius, and for sea ice, it would be a little bit colder than that, it freezes, right? Now, sea ice, as it's expanding, is pushing out salt. So sea ice is actually less salty than seawater. And still don't eat it or anything, but it is less salty, so it becomes even less dense and it floats on the surface of the sea. When that happens, it creates this really briny layer, the super salty layer of water that is now more dense than the water beneath it, so it sinks. And in Antarctica, this kind of kickstarts massive global currents. So we need sea ice to form in order to keep our ocean currents going in the way that they've been going for like a really long time. And of course, these processes are starting to slow down as a result of the climate crisis. So that's kind of a physical reason why some of these things are really, really bad. And I hope you found that interesting because I find it fascinating. Okay. Is that okay?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So here are some more data. So over here we have extent of sea ice. Okay. Now let's kind of bring it home a little bit to Hudson Bay and give us 2 conclusions here, please.
Yeah. Throw them in the chat. 2 conclusions.
2 conclusions.
Can we make about the ice in Western Hudson Bay? It's interesting. So the first thought is that there's less change than the global pattern. So maybe, but remember also the
different axes.
The different axes. So we've got kind of in the previous one we had the extent in millions of square kilometers, so an enormous scale. And in this case we've got still time on the x-axis, but the day of the year, the Julian day of the year that the ice broke up.
That's right.
So then we have Hudson Bay ice is breaking up earlier. Breaking up sooner, there's more variation. Yeah. This data is only 2 years younger than I am. There isn't a consistent increase or decrease in the ice.
We're getting old, Smith.
No, that's the thing. However you are, data is older than you are. Like their data is older than me. So that's really old.
Really old.
Yeah.
Okay. So, okay.
One of the themes that's coming in here though is variation. That there's a couple of you, there's several of you that are talking about a trend through time, but also looking at what you might plot as the residuals to say if we've got a trend, and then in any particular year, how much above or below that trend is the observance from any particular year. And one of the things that in this graph that seems to happen is that the variance might be increasing.
Right. So this affects folks in so many ways. So yeah,
it's everything.
Northern communities, the way that they are able to socialize, it happens way more in the winter than it does in the spring and the summer, because the ice you can travel on the ice, right? So folks are able to visit with families from other communities using snow machines, using dogs to be able to go where otherwise you would have to use an ATV on the tundra, and oftentimes they're inaccessible. So this affects people as well as animals. The other thing that it affects, so for me, the way it would affect me in my life is that, or before I retired, as an expedition leader, this makes travel really unpredictable. And I remember times where I would be sailing across from Greenland to Baffin Island, and I would be looking at the Marine Act, which basically has broken up the Arctic into different maritime zones. And they don't open until a certain time of the year. So you can't bring a certain type of class ship into certain areas before certain dates, right? And I remember in Greenland, there was a problem with the shipping company. They'd not checked the schedule, and I was scheduled to take the ship into Baffin Island waters 2 days before the marine shipping region was open, and so we're not allowed, right? You lose your insurance and all of these things. But the reason why they're established at those dates is because of predicted date of ice breakup and when it would be safe to navigate within those waters. And I was looking at it, and there was not an ice cube, right, in front of us or on any of the ice charts. But still, we can't go in, right? Obviously, we didn't. So these types of things affect not only animals and their diets and their life. They affect people, and they affect economies. And it's really important to recognize that these changes, we're going to have to figure out some kind of plan to adapt.
There's a great question in the chat about how long have we had accurate temperature recordings in the Arctic, which has several kinds of answers. And one of them is, if you want to think about Canada, we started the high Arctic research, post-World War II was a lot of the high Arctic recordings,
okay,
but thousands of years in the Inuit people that are there for whom this is home. And so there's kind of two different kinds of accuracy about what was this like before. Well, listen, and they'll tell you.
Yeah. Cool. So, in the context of all this change, we're going to be focusing...
Did you take that picture?
Oh, yeah. All the polar bear pictures are mine. Okay, what will happen...
Can I ask, there's one more trend line question that I think is germane in terms of where we go in the next few minutes. Has this changed any more drastically since 2004? What is the trend like now? That's a great question, and we don't have it to like quickly pop up, but we have to tell you that all of the hottest 10 years, top 10 years, have happened in the last 15 to 20 years, anywhere measured anywhere in the Arctic.
And November 5th was the hottest day on November 5th ever.
Yeah. So, is it changing more? So yes, it is.
Yep. Okay. And Buddy, furry, white, big, carnivore, is living in a place that is warming rapidly. So what's going to happen? What's going to happen to the physiology? How is that going to affect their ability to reproduce? And what's going to happen to the population of polar bears? It is a phenomenal story, and we are super excited that we get to continue to talk about it. And I think we're going to end it here for now, because you have things to do, and we're grateful to you and to your time. And we will see you on Wednesday. We will confirm what's happening further as we go. If there are any needs to, change anything, we will post on the announcements. And if it's something like major, we'll send you an email. We'll try not to, but if there's something that you need to know, we'll send you an email.
So more on Wednesday about timing.
It's everything. Important. And if you want to stick around and chat further, we'll be here in a second.